Guys, Jello15659 back again with another video, and today we'll be looking at chess notations. So first off, let's take a look at the board. As you can see, every board is labeled with a coordinate grid, going A through H horizontally and 1 through 8 vertically, starting at the bottom left corner. Now since it's a coordinate, this square would be called B2, this one would be called E1. Now let's test you guys. What would this square be called? G7, good job. Alright, let's move on to the pieces now. As you can see, it's pretty self-explanatory. King is represented by a K, queen is a Q, but the knight is represented by an N instead of a K. This is so that it doesn't get confused by the king. And since knight kind of sounds like N, and chess players don't like spelling that much, it just works out. Another thing to note is that the pawn has no letter, because it's just a lowly pawn. So let's look at the board real quick. If I were to move this pawn here, it would simply be h4 because the pawn has no letter. But now, let's quiz you guys. If I move my queen to this spot, what would I write? Good job, qh2, because the queen actually has a letter, and it's going to the space h2. Alright, moving on. Chess is a pretty violent game, so there's going to be a lot of killing. To represent this, we use an EX for pawns and an X for all the other captures. Now, let's look at the board real quick. So, if I were to take this bishop with my queen, what would I write? Alright, I'll help you guys out here. We start with a Q because we're talking about the queen. X because we're capturing a piece, and G5 because that's the square we were going. If this queen was just a pawn, we would write EX G5 because we're talking about a pawn. Alright, now let's move on to castling, but before that we need to talk about king side and queen side. So let's look at this board right here. So the half of the board that the king is closest to is called king side, and this half where the queen is closest to will be the queen side. Now, if these pieces just like weren't there, right? They were somewhere else on the board, and we could freely do a castle. This king side castle would be called O-O. Now, just like the other side, if these pieces were all doing other stuff, and we did a queenside castle, we would label it O-O-O. Alright, moving on. When you're promoting pawns, which is like, if I get this pawn all the way to the other side of the board, like that, all the pawn promotions will be labeled with an equal sign, followed by whatever piece you're promoting it to. Usually it would be a queen, so you would just type equals Q at the end. So in this case, we would just say C8 equals Q. Alright, pretty simple. Let's move on to checking. So if I were to move this queen to this side, which would check this king, I would simply write Q because it's the queen, F5 because that's the spot I'm going to, followed by a plus because every time you check an opponent's king, it's just a normal notation followed by a plus symbol at the end. Now if this were a checkmate, I would simply exchange the plus for a number sign. And that's about it.